All right, so in this section, we're going to talk about how elasticity and total revenues are related. Now, we actually already talked about it. We've already talked about it because we talked about elasticity of demand and total expenditure. Well, as it turns out, total expenditure ends up being total revenue for the firm, right? When you spend money, that's total expenditure. Well, that's revenue. The money that you spend is revenue for the firm. So we've actually already talked about this. So this is kind of a review. So, but in any case, so when demand is elastic, there's a negative relationship between price and total revenue, right? So we already saw this with total expenditure, but they move in opposite directions. And this is, again, has to do with the responsiveness, right? So if consumers are very responsive to price changes, firms can bring down their price a little bit. People buy a ton more. And so even though they brought down the price, so many more people are buying it that the money they make actually goes up. Okay, so that's what happens with total revenue and elastic demand. Now, when demand is unit elastic, the price change is exactly offset by the change in quantity, right? So if price goes up by 50%, quantity demanded goes down by 50%, and so revenues don't change, right? And then with inelastic demand, there's a positive relationship between changes in price and total revenue. So this is when people can't respond very much, or they don't respond very much to price changes. They buy relatively almost the same amount, if not exactly the same amount in the case of perfectly inelastic demand. But because of that, since they're not responsive to price changes, they can't be flexible, or they're not flexible. As price goes up, they still buy almost the same amount, and so firms make more money as a result of those price increases. All right, so let's look at a numerical example. Now, what we see here is a demand schedule. Now, as it turns out, along a demand schedule or a demand curve, different regions of the demand curve or the demand schedule are classified differently, right? So as you can see, at higher prices, the demand schedule, demand is elastic. Right in the middle there is where it's unit elastic. And then when prices are low, that's where demand is inelastic, okay? So, and then as you can see here too, the third column is total revenues, which is just the product or multiplying columns 1 and 2 together. Okay, so you can see that at first, starting at a high price of $11, as the price comes down, total revenues go up. Then we hit that unit elastic range, right? Going from $6 to $5. And as we can see, price coming down, revenues don't change in that unit elastic region. And then as we continue lowering price, revenues start to decrease, right? So there's that inelastic region where price and revenues move in the same direction. And here is graphically, right? So again, different parts of the demand curve are classified differently in terms of elasticity. And it basically turns out that the top half is the elastic region. The middle is the unit elastic part. It's really a point, but in any case, the middle point or the middle region is the unit elastic region, and then the lower half of the demand curve is the inelastic region. And here's what it looks like in terms of total revenue. So this is the total revenue curve. So for the blue portion, the elastic portion, as price goes up, as price goes down, revenues go up, and that's because the company is selling more. And then once we hit that unit elastic price, revenues don't change. And then as we continue decreasing price into that inelastic region, revenues start to decline again. So if firms were interested in maximizing revenue, which they're not, they're interested in maximizing profit. But if they were interested in maximizing revenue, they would want to charge a price that puts them right in the middle of the demand curve there at where the unit elastic demand is unit elastic. Okay, so as we just saw in the demand schedule table, total revenues, to get total revenues, it's just price times quantity sold. And so that's why we're seeing this hill shape for total revenues, right? At first, when price starts coming down, people are really responding heavily to that. So they're buying a lot more. So even though price is coming down and companies are selling each unit for less and less money, it's being offset by the huge increase in quantity, right? But then as we get into the inelastic region, those price decreases are met with very little response in quantity, and so the price coming down makes the firm earn less money. So what happens to the product of price times quantity depends on which of the opposing forces exerts a greater force on total revenue, right? So let me switch over to my doc cam real quick. Okay, so again, revenue is price times quantity, right? But as price goes up, quantity goes down, and vice versa because of the law of demand. So which of these forces is bigger is going to tell us what happens to revenue. So when demand is elastic, right? Let me start over here, and instead of thinking of it going up, let's think of it going down. Right, as price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. When we're in the elastic region, as the price comes down, that's going to bring revenue down. But remember that quantity is going up, and since it's in the elastic region, quantity is going up much more than price is coming down. So in the elastic region, right? Use some different colors, right? Price is coming down, but since it's the elastic region, quantity is going up by much more, right? So the quantity going up by much more is allowing revenue to increase. With the unit elastic region, these things are exactly offset, right? They exactly equal one another. They're the exact same size. And so revenue basically stays the same. And then when we're in the inelastic region, right, price is changing a lot more than quantity because it's very unresponsive. And so when we're in this region, price is the dominant force, and so revenues go down. Okay, so that's basically what we're talking about, right? This is exactly why we care about elasticity in the first place, right? It helps us understand these things. And as a business, if you were to ever own a business, you'd be particularly interested in these things, right? You want to know whether to make more money, whether you should increase the price or decrease the price, right, to make more money. So, so here's a table that sort of summarizes everything we talked about. Maybe take a screenshot of this if you want, or you have access to the slides on Moodle, so you can get it there. But this is basically a summary of everything we've been talking about so far.